Hello, I'm SB Moores, and today I am recording this video for the seventh time. I cannot stop getting interrupted, but now I think I will finally have some free time to finish up this video I've been trying to make. This is just going to be a video regarding some things that happened very early on in Dust of Dreams. So this is going to be spoilers up until the end of chapter 3 of Dust of Dreams. So if you've not read that far, I'd click off now and come back when you have. Um, but if you have read up to that point, you could probably make a good assumption about what this video might be about. And that is the Deck of Dragons reading performed in chapter 3 that Fiddler does. And it was very, very interesting. I think this is probably the most interesting Deck of Dragons reading that has occurred in the series thus far that I can remember. I don't really remember any that happened in Gardens of the Moon or really anything before the Bone Hunters. I don't remember any reading before that. But this was interesting in a lot of regards because I feel that this particular reading might be the last reading of the Deck of Dragons. I feel like this is going to be the one that pushes us towards the end in terms of Deck of Dragon readings and castings of the tiles. And it is immensely interesting what occurs in this chapter regarding them. But it was so interesting, in fact, that this is the first time throughout all of the Malazan books or any book that I've ever read where I've taken physical notes after the fact of what occurred. I did this partially so I didn't have to continuously flip back and forth to the book during a video, and so I didn't have to memorize every single thing that happened. And I can just remember it while looking at this sheet, my little cheat sheet. But it was a very interesting reading, and I just wanted to talk about what I thought it meant, some ideas that I had about it, some theories, where I think the series is going to be headed towards the end with this reading. And yeah, so I figured it'd be a good video, since I'm not able to finish these books in a week flat like some people are. I'm not that quite fast at reading, and I get burnt out if I read that fast. Fastest I've read, excuse me, fastest I've read one of these Malazan books was probably The Bone Hunters, which took me about 3 weeks to read. So hopefully Dust of Dreams goes by that quick as well. I really do love all the chapters with the Bone Hunters, and I love all the chapters, so I'll probably be getting through it hopefully quickly. But without further ado, I will give a quick synopsis of what happened during the Deck of Dragons reading, the cards that were thrown out, and then afterward I'll share my thoughts about it. But this Deck of Dragons reading also started out interestingly, because as always, Fiddler does not want to do it, but this time he performs it without anything else occurring. They're all stone cold sober. They're not stone cold drunk like they were at the Deck of Dragons reading at the end of the Bone Hunters, where he made them drink that strange alcoholic concoction he made. So much so that Bottle fell over unconscious by the end. Bottle even asks before this one starts if they want to do that this time as well, but he says, "Nope, we're going to be sober for this one," which I think shows how grave, serious, and deadly this Deck of Dragons reading was, especially with some stuff that Fiddler says during and after this reading. But it's interesting because they started off by asking him when he's going to be ready, and he says, "You'll know when I'm ready, and we're not going to know until I'm ready." And then Briss Benedict is about to stop it, saying that the Errant is going to show up and attack, and right as he goes to do that, 3 cards get dealt out, and that'll start our reading off. So I will just tell you what happened really quickly in case you need a refresher. The first 3 cards were not given to any person at the table of this reading. They were just general, and they went in the order of Spinner of Death, Knight of Shadow, and Master of the Deck. Spinner of the Death, we don't know who that is, or I didn't recall it being stated who the Spinner of Death was, but we know they might not know, but we know that the Knight of Death is Serempedak and Trolsengar's unborn child. And we know that because of some stuff that Bug says, as well as him revealing to us that Trolsengar was the Knight of Shadow before he died, which we did not know, but I'm sure some people made that inference. I did not, but it makes sense when you think about it, and it was a very interesting revelation. But that's who the Knight of Shadow is, in a sense. And because some of these cards have actual people associated with them, not everyone, which will come up, but a lot of them do, and a lot of them are related to the high houses, obviously. They're all related to either the high houses or the uh, the unaligned. But master of the deck is Ganos Paran. We already know this. He is the brother of Tavor Paran, the adjunct who ordered this reading. So that's interesting on its own. Especially since he knows a few of the people that are at this reading. He knows Fiddler, he knows Tavor, he knows Quick Ben, he knew Hedge. So that was interesting. But after that, all of the cards that were dealt were for specific people that were present during this reading. So we'll go down the line. The fourth card thrown out was Virgin of Death, and it was given to Sin, who is the orphaned young high mage child who was found in House of Chains by Clan Mekar, I believe. And she's important in this year beyond the fact that she's a high mage. She's integral to the Bone Hunters because she helped get a lot of them out of the city in both instances that people escaped, in that she corralled the firestorm away from a main passage so that certain soldiers could just walk straight out of Yigatan, and then she also stayed behind to save the bone hunters that were stuck under the city with Faradin's sword. uh the fifth card that was thrown out was Scepter, which was given to Grub, who was the orphan Seven Cities child who was adopted by Captain Keneb, Fist Keneb. He's very integral because to the Bone Hunters, in the sense that beyond the fact that they are called the Bone Hunters because of Yigatan, they were sort of the association with them and bones started off with Grub holding up a thigh bone as the adjunct was giving her speech right before they were going to march from Erin to Raraku. And beyond this, he seems to have a weird mysticism about him that we see throughout the series where he knows things that he probably shouldn't. And I'll speak on him more because there's something very interesting in House of Chains that I have to talk about that relates to him being Scepter. Um, but the sixth card that was thrown out was Magus of Dark, which was given to Quick Ben. We all know who Quick Ben is. High Mage, former bridge burner, now a bone hunter. Um, Man of a million faces, I'd say, because it seems as if he plays every side of every battle, and you really don't know what side he's actually on. Although I would assume he's on the bone hunter side. He's on his old soldiers' side, is what his old friends' side is what it seems to me. Even at times, it can be a bit strenuous, especially with some interactions he has with Hedge throughout Reaper's Gale. But the next card was Mason of Death, which was given to Hedge, former bridge burner who ascended because of the Tano Spirit Walker Kimlock's Tano song. So he ascended with them when they died at Black Coral, but he persisted as a ghost that wandered, and then he rematerialized into resurrected as a material being because of staying in the refugium for so long. So he's back. The next card was Queen of Dark, which was given to Sandalath Drew Corlat, the Teist Andy that was washed up and stuck on the Crippled God's small island with Withal, the Mekros weaponsmith, who created the sword that Rulad Sengar used, that cursed blade. But Queen of Dark is a very interesting card for the High House of Dark, especially when you consider events that occur in Told Hounds. But more on that later. The next card was Champion of Life, which was thrown at Lestari Yil, former Red Blade, now essentially taking the same role that Amber or Tamber had with the adjunct, except maybe their relationship is not so romantic as it was between Tavor and Tamber back then. But beyond this, I feel like it's important to mention at this point that people are getting thrown into the walls when these cards are placed out. The cards are smacking into their sternums, breaking ribs, crushing their skulls against the back of, crunching their skulls on the back of the walls, plasters raining down, people are getting hurt, going unconscious. I think Grub gets sent up into the corner of a wall and blood starts seeping down from him because he hit himself so hard. So it's definitely a rough reading, this one. We've never seen a reading quite like this. Next was Obelisk, which was given to Bottle. Obelisk is interesting because it's associated with Burn. It's one of the unaligned cards. So that's interesting, especially. But we'll get back to that and some ideas I have with him being Obelisk. The next card was Orb given to Gessler, followed by Throne given to Stormy. Briss Benedict was the only one where the card didn't absolutely slam into him and break his skull against the wall, and he was given the King of Life card. And in specific, afterward, Fiddler stared at him and said, "You're needed." Um, so that's interesting. Banishtar was next, and he was given the card Fool in Chains, and Fiddler looked at him and then also said, "You keep bad company." So that's very interesting for that. And then finally, as we think Tavor Paran's about to get dealt a card, she is not. And Fiddler says, "For you, nothing." And thus the reading is ended. And then obviously the Errant also shows up, and so a lot of forces are in play in Latheris when this Deck of Dragons reading is happening. As Bug puts it, or Mail, the Elder God of the Seas, he says, "This is no ordinary caster of the tiles or reader of the deck." Um, so that was the reading, and I'll go into some ideas that I have, and I don't know who Spinner of Death could be. That one, I can't really imagine who that could be referring to. It could be referring to a character we haven't even seen yet, or that was not present at the reading, kind of how Ganos Pran was not, as well as Seren and Troll Senkar's unborn child, who obviously was not at that reading. But I feel like it could be for a character that we have not yet seen or wasn't at the reading. Maybe it was Tanakalian, the shield anvil of the Grey Helms, or the Grey Swords. But or sorry, the Parish Grey Helms, yes. But I don't know. That's just a general idea I'm throwing out there. Knight of Shadow being for Seren Padak and Troll Sengar's unborn child. I don't think that this series is going to have enough of a time skip to the point where her child's going to be born, but it could turn out to be a situation where he grows up immediately, kind of how Rud Alal did, how he was born and then was fully grown within several weeks, which was definitely an interesting idea, or is an interesting idea that could happen with Troll, and or with Paul and Saren's child, and I could definitely see it happening because I could definitely see her ending up in the refugium. um, I don't know if that's what caused Rudalal to grow up so fast, but that's my initial idea. Um, but mm, um, Ganos Paran, the master of the deck card being thrown out, I think definitely shows that he's going to be in these next two books in some way, shape, or form. And this is further, I feel, characterized by the fact, or given credence by the fact that in Toll Hounds, some bridge burners that were in Dargistan tried to contact Ganos, and he basically said, "We're in a bad situation. You need to just you need to talk to Krupe. I can't help you right now. We've got ourselves into a hard spot." And he is with One Arm's host. Um, Sadly, One Arm died, and the Bone Hunter, so it's been given to him. I don't know where he is, where he could have gone, but he definitely could have gone to Lether because he was on Seven Cities, and Seven Cities is where part of the Lether Empire was invading. So definitely could be going there in those regards. I have a feeling that they'll meet up later. A lot of armies meeting up when you consider there's also the Barghast, as well as the Parish Grey Helms, and there's the Kundril Burn Tiers, which are kind of adjutants to the or like an additional force added onto the Bone Hunters, the Malazan 14th Army. But a lot of armies meeting up. But I have a feeling that Ganner's Pran is going to be important, especially with this unknown conflict that is occurring with him and the Errant and all of these elder gods and the whole concept of the holds and the tiles. Um, but that leads us into the people that were present that got cards. And for Sin, I don't really know what Virgin of Death could mean. My best guess is that this means that she will be this no longer, and there's going to be a lot of death associated with Sin. Being as powerful of a high mage as she is, and being a child who likes to associate with Grub, who himself has all these mystical things going on, I have a feeling that what this means is that there is going to be a lot of death coming in the series, being associated with the High House of Death. And maybe she'll have something to do with Hood being dead, and maybe this is a really far out there theory, in my opinion. Maybe she resurrects Hood in some way, which would definitely be something. Um, but I can't say too much on that. Or possibly it could mean that she will be the one who sees no death in this series, which I feel like would be a very interesting misdirection of this card being casted to her. Because the idea of version of death, maybe she's not acquainted with it. She won't become acquainted with death, which I feel would also be possibly a very good thing because why would we want Sin to see more people die? Or why would we want Sin to kill people? She's just a child, although she does dance in fire, that we know. So, uh, who knows with that one? Those are just some ideas I wanted to throw out there. But Grub having Scepter is very interesting, and I feel like it's further foreshadowing for something that was directly told to us all the way back in House of Chains. And so there's a lot of dots I connected to come to this conclusion. And that is the something with the Imperial Malazan Empire, which is the I believe on their flag they have the orb, the scepter, and the throne, scepter throne, also the name of a book. Um, but those are three of the unaligned cards in the deck of dragons. But him having scepter, when I think scepter, I think regal, I think holding a high office, I think holding power. And I think the foreshadowing with this is the fact that later in his life, Grub would end up becoming the first sword of the late Empire period of the Malazan Empire. And the reason I know this is because back in House of Chains, I don't know exactly what chapter was the epigraph of, but it is a later historical recounting saying that not much is known about Grub for sort of the late Empire period. Not much is known about his childhood in Seven Cities because Captain Keneb did not keep good records in his diary about him. Uh, so I believe that's what that is referring to with that. And we know there's a lot of mystical things happening with him already. So, um, next is Quickben, who got Magus of Dark. What I think this is referring to, or what I think this is implying, is that as this is developing, and with Animander Rake sacrificing the previous book, and Mother Dark coming back, and the Tice Andi presumably being able to go home, I think what this means is that Quickben as a mage is going to be integral to Corald Galen's, not reformation, because it was never shattered like Corald Emerlon was, but for the what would be the opposite of an exodus, re-entry of the Tice Andi. I feel like he's going to be very important to that. And I have a feeling with Draconus coming back and all of these characters and the Tice Andi and Mother Dark coming back, that he is going to be integral to possibly a battle that's going to occur. I would imagine that now that this Elder Goddess is back, and based off of some words said about Draconus in the previous book, which is just that he's back, how important he must be as an Elder God as well, Forger of Dragnipur no longer. I feel as if Quickben is going to aid in the House of Dark, High House Dark, or help the Tice Andi in some way. And they're going to be related to this final battle that is occurring. And this is kind of relating to a video that I was going to make, but that I scrapped the other day because I was basically making a theory video of me thinking of where the series is going to go, what's going to happen, who's going to appear. Obviously, I think the climax of the series has a lot to do with the Crippled God, the final book being simply titled The Crippled God. But beyond this, I have a feeling that there's going to be a war between the Teist Andi, the Teist Eder, or maybe not the Teist Eder, because their whole shtick seems to have been dealt with already. Not their shtick, but a lot of their issues that were happening. They've gone back to their lands to the north of Lether, it seems. But there was something mentioned in Reaper's Gale in the glossary, and that was the Just Wars, which were wars fought between the Tys Leosian and the Forquerel Sale. What we know in Dust of Dreams is that there's going to be a lot to do with the K'chain Shamal. And we also know that there's going to be at least a little bit to do with the Forquerel Sale. And there are a lot of tidbits throughout the series about the K'chain Shamal, about the K'chain Naruk, the Forquerel Sale, and the Tys Leosian that have been sprinkled throughout this series that I think are indicating a much bigger war happening in the background that is going to re-come up. Especially considering some stuff. Oh, and with Jagdhuts, especially considering some things that were stated by Kaladin Varud regarding a war that was seemingly still going on between the Jaghut and the Forquerel Sale. To give a very, very quick rundown of what I think is going to happen, I believe that the series is going to. Well, we know at this point that they're heading into the wastelands to the east, and that they are then going to be probably going to the kingdom of Kholance, the Empire of Kholance, or wherever Kholance is to the east of these wastelands. And I believe that in Kholance, there's going to be, I don't know how the conflagration is going to happen, but it is going to involve the war that was going, these just wars that were happening between the Tys Leosian and the Forquerel Sale. Because there are Forquerel Sale in this book, and they've been sprinkled throughout the series. There's going to be, beyond this, the Tys Andi, as well as Mother Dark, are going to join this fray or inadvertently become a part of it. And I believe a further war that's going to be occurring is with the K'chain Shamal and the K'chain Naruk, because it was mentioned in Reaper's Gale that the K'chain Naruk fought against the K'chain Shamal. And they both were thought to be extinct. But we knew the K'chain Shamal were not extinct because of Gunth Match and I forget what the other's name was, but those were two K'chain Shamal that were bodyguards for Red Mask. So we know that K'chain Shamal are still alive, and we know from the Draash Personae of this book that there's even more. Beyond this, we know that the K'chain Naruk are still alive because in the Bone Hunters, Gessler, Stormy, and Quickben are privy to seeing about a dozen sky fortresses floating through the Imperial Warren going somewhere, all presumably filled to the brim with K'chain Naruk. We know this because later on in that book, Gnog finds one of these or finds something and then is attacked by, as she puts them, short tails. Further noting, she then said that she's happy they're short tails because they're less violent than the long tails, which is interesting to say right after she starts to absolutely destroy, after she's ripped to shreds by these K'chain Naruk. But I believe that's another war that's coming. So I believe that all of this is coming together, and it has something to do with the fact that Queen of Dark is coming back, and that I feel like all of this is sort of showing how all of these events are sort of just coming together. I don't know what some of these mean. With Bottle having Obelisk, the reason I think you got Obelisk is associated with Burn, which is like Mother Earth, the nature. And Bottle is touched by Eris All, who's a progenitor spirit of the Tarthanol, I believe, or one of those cultures that the Letheri wiped out and assimilated. But beyond this, we know that the Eris All were essentially the first race on the Malazan world to really start existing. They're like proto-humans almost, even before the T'Lana Mass. The T'Lana Mass are kind of like Neanderthals. These are even before them, almost like right when whatever species, which would be the Aerosol, or whatever came before the Aerosol, then became the Aerosol, and then the Aerosol, I would presume, became the T'Lana Mass, and then the Imass became humans eventually. Or I don't think the Imass became humans. It's kind of muddied because I remember something earlier in the series where it mentioned that the T'Lana Mass are essentially ancestor humans, and it was implied that the Aerosol are ancestor of everything like that. But that's neither here nor there. I don't know how that relates to how ancient the Jaghut are and how even more ancient the K'chain Shamal were. But it's all interesting. But I believe that them being so ancient, the Aerosol, and them being such a young race on this world indicates a much closer relationship with the earth and with nature. So I believe that's why Bottle was given Obelisk. Now, Gessel and Stormy being given Orb and Throne, I think relates them to Grub, because the way that it is Orb, Scepter, Throne. I mean, that's the name of one of the books, but I believe in the earlier glossaries, it's also given as that, Orb, Scepter, Throne. They're a triumvirate of the unaligned cards that all sort of go together. There's the scepter that has the orb in it sitting upon the throne. Um, for them, as much as I could say, I think that they're going to have something to do with Grub coming in these last two books. Beyond this, I could also definitely make some assumptions that they probably are going to have something to do with these Tice Leosian and these Just Wars. Um, the reason that I say this is because they were mentioned, or Beak, rest his soul with his brother. Um, Thank you, Hood, in that instance. It is mentioned by him that they were bathed in fires of Thyre, Talon, possibly even Corald Thirlon, which is why they are that almost ascended golden hue that they have. So I think that that could relate to that in that sense, that they're going to have something to do with that. Lestara Yill being the champion of life is very interesting, and I don't know quite how to put it. And I feel like it's going to have some parallels to the journey that Dassam Ultor has taken, because Dassam Ultor was once the champion of death. And obviously he's not that anymore. I believe it's Bawden now. Um, but him having been it and then becoming the Lord of Tragedy, I believe that she's going to be the opposite, a parallel. She's the champion of life, and even if she doesn't stay the champion of life, I feel like hers is not going to be a tragedy as much as it already has been. Her tragedy is past, I believe. And even though I think tragic things are going to continue, I believe that Lestariel is going to have a good ending. And I believe that's what that meant. Um, with Briss Beddict getting King of Life and then not being attacked by the card, and then Fiddler saying you're needed, you are needed, I believe that that has two meanings. One was a very immediate meaning of how he contributed to the bluff against the Errant to not attack the people in that room. Briss couldn't have done that if he was incapacitated because a card broke his sternum. So that's the first you're needed idea of that. But I believe further than this, it indicates that Briss Beddict is going to be going with Fiddler and this group. I believe he's going to be sent by Tehel possibly, or Mail, or maybe later on in the series after these people have left, or the Bone Hunters have all left, he's going to have to catch up with them and be important. Or it indicates, because he got King of Life, that he has some connection with Lestara Yill, because she's the champion of life. So maybe that indicates a relationship that they could have blossom, especially since they interacted before this. Because it seems as if the romantic relationship that Amber and Tavor shared is not going to continue with Lostariel and Tavor, which I think is a good thing. I feel like that fits very well with what happened. Also, Lostariel previously loved Pearl, um, who sadly died. Not the Demon Pearl, not the Ghislaine Demon Pearl that was in Dragniper, the Claw. But I always found it funny that those two had the same name, because sometimes I would imagine them in each other's positions, which were funny. But that's what I have for King of Life. It could also indicate that the Queen of Dreams possibly have something to do with Briss, because the Queen of Dreams is the queen of High House of Life. So that could further show some ideas that the Queen of Dreams might have something related to what's coming. Although her card was not placed down, so who knows? Maybe hers is something dealt with in one of the different series. But then there is Banishtar, who got Fool in Chains. Now, beyond just the initial idea that he spoke to the Errant before this, and that makes him a fool because the Errant seemingly is not a very good god, just power hungry. to keep his reign as the master of the empty throne, or the man behind the empty throne, master of the empty hold, keeping the tiles and the holds intact as this deck of dragons and the Warrens threaten this old oracular system and magic system. Besides it just referring to that, I believe it refers to the fact that Banishtar is going to make foolish choices. And I also believe it means that there is somebody who has an eye out for him, Fool in Chains, who is chained the crippled god. I have a feeling that this is indicating that the crippled god has very specific plans for Banishtar to use him on his side. I think the idea behind this is that he is the last priest of Direk, and there's something within him of Direk that is now forming. And what I find interesting, or the idea that I have, is that previously the entire priesthood of Direk was slain, was smited by Direk herself because they were betraying her for the crippled god. I have a feeling that the crippled god's plans with Direk's followers don't end there, even though all the priesthood is now dead except for Banishtar, who is excommunicated and is now again the last priest of Direk. I have a feeling that this indicates that Banishtar is either susceptible to the crippled god or that the crippled god has his eyes on him. He's the fool in chains. He is going to be tricked, I believe. And I believe that you could draw another parallel to this, which is that Banishtar was introduced in the Bone Hunters, and that whole idea of the Bone Hunters, everything in it was a trap. And the final line of the Bone Hunters was, and the traps in their elaborate elegance were never empty for long. I have a feeling that this means that Banishtar will be a fool in chains. Chains, in a sense, could be a trap. So I have a feeling that Banishtar is going to be trapped come by the King in Chains in these next two books, and it's going to heavily relate to events going on with Direk, whatever they be, within the Pantheon. But those are my general ideas of what's happening. Oh, I forgot to mention Hedge. Hedge being the Mason of Death. He was already dead. I believe that him being the Mason of Death, what is a Mason? You build stuff. I have a feeling that, and he also walked across Verdith Anath, the Jaghut Bridge of Death in their mythos. He has come back from the dead. I have a feeling that because Hood died in the previous book, he is going to be integral to them coming back. Hood reforming. Even though Hood stated that he would be the Lord of Death no longer at the end of that book, I have a feeling that's not going to stay true. Or even if it does, possibly. And this could be a stretch, but maybe it's not, considering how crazy the events in this series are. People killing the god of death and whatnot. I have a feeling that Hedge could maybe take up that position as the new Lord of Death, the King of High House of Death. But for now, he is the Mason of Death. And I believe that this could also mean building death. Maybe Hedge is going to be integral to some very serious deaths that are going to happen. He is a soldier after all. He's a sapper. Hedge probably has the thickest skull out of any of them I've seen. Being a ghost carrying cussers around, I mean, that's pretty dope. So, but those are just the ideas that I have for what these cards are indicating about the series, what could happen. I had a little extra theories in there. Oh, I forgot the most important one. Tavor. For you, nothing. I think the fact that Tavor is not given a card could possibly be an indication that she is going to die, which I am very sad about. Because I quite like Tavor. And even though she's had a questionable leadership throughout this series, she is cold iron. And my hope is that in the end, she's able to just do the best that she can. And I hope that those themes of empathy really tie into her by the end, where the Bone Hunters, even if it's decided she didn't make the correct choices, that they understand that she made her choices and that she tried her absolute hardest. Um, Beyond this, Fiddler afterward mentions that nobody was found; they were simply marked. And I don't exactly know what that means, but I have a feeling that it indicates that there are targets on these people's backs. that it basically indicates that these people are not destined to do these things, but they will do these things that are implied by the reading if they are given the chance. And I believe that what he means by marked is that now there are going to be powers that want these people dead so that they are not the ones to do these things. Um, Also, that they were not predestined to do these things, possibly, like how a lot of the readings go, how things are sort of destined to be. It's fate, it's convergence. In this, I have a feeling that none of these people were originally meant to do this, except for maybe Fiddler, but now, because he did this reading, they are meant to do this. It forced this fate upon them almost. The adjunct has forced this to happen, which I feel like could play into the themes of the adjunct's command. And the fact that Tavor was not given a card possibly indicate that she was the only one present who had the chance to stop this and she chose not to. But that is neither here nor there. I don't actually know. I'm going to have to wait and see. Maybe my analysis on this is not perfect. These are just my ideas of what's happening. I'm going to continue reading this book, but these were just my ideas of what's going to happen in the series, what this Deck of Dragons reading meant, and yeah, no, I just thought that it would be an interesting video to hear my thoughts in it before I continued through the book. Um I hope that you enjoyed the video. I will hopefully be making more videos about this as well as Shadows Linger soon when I finish that. I haven't quite been able to read it as much as I wanted to, but hopefully I can get some reading done after this video maybe. Um, I have a feeling that I'm also going to be making some videos about another book series that I have read and I am slowly rereading in between all these other books, which is the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. I recently had a friend in real life who was interested in reading it and he started reading it, so now I would like to. I would like to slowly skim through and reread the first three books and then finally finish the fourth. So expect some videos on that in the near to far future as well, depending on how long that takes me. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you have a good day. So thank you for watching. Goodbye.